All right, well, let's get moving here in our study of the life of Christ. We've been working our way through little by little. The last time we were together, we talked about the Beatitudes from Matthew in the Sermon on the Mount. We also talked about how there is this other sermon that is delivered by Jesus. Some people call it the Sermon on the Plain, as in the flat spot on the ground. It could be that the flat spot on the ground was up on the side of the mountain, which makes them in the same place in the same time, but nobody knows. So there are a lot of similarities between Luke's Sermon on the Plain and Matthew's Sermon on the Mount. I think we said last time that there's about a third of it that overlaps. But we're going to begin by looking at Luke chapter 6 and start in verse 20. I'll let you know right now, my nose and eyes are out of control as of yesterday, so this is nearby for a reason. Okay. Yeah. Apparently the spring is loose right here. Looking at his disciples, Luke 6:20, he said, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who hunger now, for you will be satisfied. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. Blessed are you when people hate you, when they exclude you and insult you and reject your name as evil because of the Son of Man. Rejoice in that day and leap for joy, because great is your reward in heaven, for that is how their ancestors treated the prophets." Okay, so as we read through those verses, you may be going, yeah, that sounds a lot like what we talked about last week. That sounds a lot like the Sermon on the Mount, Beatitudes, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the meek. Yeah. Sorry, healthcare.
Oh, you did those too, huh?
But it's not hard to imagine that somebody who has come to teach and to preach, that they would have some recurring themes, that there would be points that would be near and dear to their heart. So it's not difficult to imagine that Jesus would do the same thing in his ministry. Today, preachers and professors and politicians all do the same thing. They bang on that same drum beat all the time until people kind of get it in them. And that's sort of what we see Jesus doing. I mean, I can't believe that the only time he ever said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit," was one time on the side of the mountain in Matthew chapter 5. I believe that again and again, as Jesus goes through his ministry, teaching and preaching, whether it's on the side of a hill or on a plain or on a boat or on a beach or in the synagogue, that he's bringing up the same things again and again, the stuff that really matters the most. So it would seem like if we hear Jesus say something more than once or twice in the Gospels, it probably was said way more often than that, and it must really be something that he wants us to pay attention to. So, in Matthew 5, 6, 7, and in Luke 6, these two different passages, distinct passages, there is some overlap. We've started looking there. Blessed are you when you are poor. Okay, there's one of the major differences right there. In Matthew 5, when Jesus delivers the Beatitudes, blessed, how does it go? Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Okay, so it's blessed are those who. Here in Luke, what does he say? Blessed are you when. I mean, blessed are you when you are poor, yours is the kingdom. Blessed are you who hunger, you will be satisfied. Blessed are you when people hate you because of the Son of Man. It seems like it's a little more, well, what would we call that? A little more directive, a little more personal. Like, this isn't just kind of a, blessed are all the people who have really awful things happen to them. Blessed are the people who are down, beaten, and run over and doormats.
Like he's talking about the crowd in Matthew, and he's talking to the crowd in.
Yeah. That seems like an interesting distinction. That the Sermon on the Mount is more general. Like, there are going to be people who have things happen to them this way, but don't worry about it because they will get what is due them, whether good or bad. In Luke, it's, hey you guys, I see you and I see you and I see you, and I know that you're broke and that you're hungry and that you're sad. But hang on, you're going to be better. Things are going to change. You will be different. One of the commentators used the phrase reversal of fortune a number of times in talking about Luke's version of these truths. Okay? You are broke, you are hungry, you are sad, you're grieving, but don't worry. If you'll just hang on long enough, everything's going to come around, baby. It's going to be okay. And then in a little bit, if you are living high on the hog and feeling really good about things, and you're laughing and partying and everybody looks up to you, just wait, because it's all going to turn around. There's going to be this reversal of fortune. Verse 21 is a little different. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. That doesn't ring quite the way it does in Matthew's version about those who mourn. But again, Jesus is looking at those who have some personal grief. He's looking at those in the nation who are hurting, who are crying out to God, and the answer is, you're going to laugh. You're going to celebrate. There will be joy. Think back just a few weeks to when we saw Jesus preaching in the synagogue at Nazareth. When he rolled open the scroll and he read those verses from Isaiah. Do you remember what the point of those verses was? Do you remember what Jesus said was happening in that moment?
He had come to fulfill.
Yeah, he was.
Okay?
Yeah.
The scripture's being fulfilled right before your eyes this morning, today, whatever.
I am he.
Yeah. Isaiah 61. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn, to provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. Okay, so what Jesus declared he had come to do really is sort of like to be the deliverer of the reversal of fortune. All you people, you've been so run over and so burdened and so neglected and so ignored and so taken advantage of. You've been lost and in the dark and held captive. I'm here. And I'm going to change everything. And in these verses, and as well as in Matthew 5, Jesus is really sort of emphasizing, again, things are going to change. I've come. I'm here. Whatever has been is going to be different. For most of you who are listening in the crowd, along the beach, on the side of the mountain, your lives are difficult. They're extremely challenging. There is not a lot of comfort. There is certainly no luxury for most of you. But that is going to change because I have come. At least that's the way that I look at it. Probably the one thing that I've enjoyed the most about this pass through the Gospels is what happened in Nazareth in that synagogue. And to keep in mind that Jesus says very clearly there, this is why I have come. This is what I'm going to bring about. Everything that's talked about here, that's what I'm going to do. That's my mission. That's my purpose. That's my reason for being. And then being able to track that through all the encounters that he has with Pharisees and prostitutes and drunks and lepers and everybody else that he comes in contact with. He's really living out this purpose and this plan. Big thoughts or questions, comments?
I don't know if somebody from our church got up in a pulpit and said what Jesus was saying. I'm not sure I would believe either. I mean, what about maybe one of our teenagers? They get up there and, I don't know.
Well, it might make a difference if they've been sent by God or if they were up there because they've been dared by their people in Sunday school class. I mean, if you believe that the person who is standing there at the pulpit with the microphone and the camera, if you really do believe that they have some kind of special purpose or gift from God, that you have looked up to them and have seen them do miraculous things again and again. If they started to talk that way, it would be a lot easier to accept it than, if somebody off the street wanders in here on a Sunday morning and says, I have a message from the Lord. It's about me. Bam. Which is what had happened with Jesus. I mean, he had been performing miracles and teaching and preaching and casting out demons and doing all kinds of things before he got to Nazareth. They already thought that he was something special, that he was a great teacher, a good rabbi, and a prophet from God. And then he delivers these words to say, these prophecies that are 700 years old, they are coming true right before your eyes this morning. I'm here to declare that I am the fulfiller of this promise. But I think we probably need to make sure that we look at Jesus's life and ministry really through that lens that he sets up in Luke chapter 4. This is what I have come to do. To bring light, to bring life, to bring freedom, to bring joy. I've come to change the lives of the people.
But they didn't believe.
Well, he's not going to change their lives. That's the thing, that he's not just laying this out. This is not Jesus saying on this side of the mountain, I'm going to do this for every single person in the world. I'm just going to lay it on them whether they want it or not. Jesus says that this is what's going to happen if they will believe, if they will follow, if God is the first priority in their lives. This is what's going to happen. There is personal acceptance that is necessary in order for there to be this kind of change. Because the crowd does have Pharisees, teachers of the law. They've come along to see what the teacher's going to say this time, see if they agree with it or not, to find out what they can argue with him about him. Will they continue to have more joy? Will they be set free? Will they have light in life? No, because they don't believe. which is the next part of what Jesus delivers in Luke, but not necessarily in Matthew. The first part of the words are encouraging for the people who are there. Another big difference in Matthew, you've got those Beatitudes. Blessed are those who, happy are those who, the joy is theirs who. But in Luke, it's a little different. He gives blessings to all the people who are down and out, and then he lays some woes upon the, what's the opposite of down and out? Up and coming. Again, he's looking toward a reversal of fortune. These people, the religious leaders, have things now, but they won't later. In verse 24 he says, "But woe to you who are rich, for you have already received your comfort. Woe to you who are well fed now, for you will go hungry. Woe to you who laugh now, for you will mourn and weep. Woe to you when everyone speaks well of you, for that is how their ancestors treated the false prophets." So why are these people so well off? Why are they rich? Well, the implication would be that they have achieved everything at the expense of others. They have prioritized wealth and possessions and luxury over spiritual life and health. They have moved through life oblivious to those around them who are hurting, who are in need. They have moved through life unconcerned about spiritual things. They're making sure that all the boxes are checked, that things look okay on the outside. And as such, they're going to face a harsh reality later. They have everything they could possibly think of. They have made their lives comfortable and easy. They get special attention where they go. They have fancy robes, they have fancy hair, their beards are perfect, their shoes are perfect, their execution of the law is perfect on the outside. But they have neglected the people around them. They have gotten, if you go back like to the book of Ezekiel, God condemns the elders of Israel, the shepherds of Israel, because they have gotten fat off of the lambs that they should have been caring for. They've been eating them all up, consuming them. You're not good shepherds. You don't have a good heart, and I'm going to stop that. I'm going to send a good shepherd who will take care of my people. And so that's really the same idea that Jesus gives here in these woes to those who are fat and sassy and entitled and lauded and praised. Hope you enjoyed it, because it's not going to be this way for much longer. There's going to be a big change. Okay, and so that we're going to flip back now to Matthew chapter 5. We're going to take a little break from Luke. In the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, starting in verse 13, Jesus covers a variety of material, which would lead some people to believe that this really wasn't one preaching session on the side of the mountain, but this is really sort of a compilation of a lot of things that Jesus taught in a lot of different places, and just kind of laid out here in this idea that it all happened at once. I'm not sure you have to believe one way or the other. I still imagine Jesus on the side of the rolling hills along the shores of Galilee, with thousands of people around him delivering these spiritual truths. Verse 13 of Matthew 5. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Okay, we're not going to spend large amounts of time going over each one of these paragraphs here. We want to get the gist of them and then move on. Jesus says in those two paragraphs, you are salt and light of the earth. Like salt, people have their place in the world. They have value. Like salt, there is penetration and preservation. In a week and a half, you're going to have mashed potatoes with your spiral sliced ham. If there's not salt in those mashed potatoes, are they going to be any good? No, they're going to taste bad. They're going to be missing something. Will it be okay? Will you want to eat it? Yeah. You put enough gravy on it, maybe it'll be all right. But the salt penetrates the food. It brings flavor to the food. And in Jesus's day, and to some extent still today, salt is a preserver of food. It prevents against decay. God's people are supposed to be that way in society today. There's that line in there about if it loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? Sodium chloride will always be sodium chloride, and it'll always be salt. Impure salt, like you might get out of the lake over here, this salt, the actual salt will leach out of it and leave the little crusty stuff behind. That could be maybe what Jesus is talking about. The rabbis had a solution about salt. Like if salt loses the saltiness, how can it be made salty again? How do they word it? I just read it this morning and thought, that's gross. Through the afterbirth of a mule.
Oh.
You know what's wrong with that statement?
Everything.
Mules don't give birth.
Bing, 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 bing. Mules don't give birth, so there is no afterbirth of a mule. So what their point is, there's nothing that can make salt salty. Yeah.
No.
But that's an incredibly disgusting image.
Yes, it is.
You're welcome.
So we are the salt of it. We are to be the salt of the earth.
We're to penetrate into our culture. We are to bring preservation. We are to bring savor and seasoning to life. We're supposed to bring light into the darkness. I don't know if you've done this kind of a thing before, but back east, most of the Midwest is full of caves. The biggest part of the cave system in the U.S. and maybe in the world is in Kentucky, Mammoth Cave, Kentucky, and they drag you kicking and screaming into this dark, wet hole, you're so far in that there is no light that comes in from the outside, and then they flip off the electric lights. And you can put your hand right here, and you can wave it back and forth, and nothing changes, nothing gets better. You can't see anything. And then, once your eyes are accustomed to total pitch black darkness, then the ranger brings out his lighter and goes, so you have one little tongue of fire. And you know how far across that room you can see it? everywhere in that room. In this giant, cavernous, amphitheater-like cave, just one little tongue of fire can be seen from everywhere. Can you read the newspaper in there? Well, no. But that light is visible, and it pierces through all that darkness. You can't get really far enough away from that match that you can't see the light because the darkness is so thick. And that's the way Jesus says that Christians are supposed to be, that they're the light on the top of the hill, that everybody can see it all the way around. If everything goes pitch black dark here on the Wasatch Front, and there is one guy with a flashlight on the side of the mountain over there, everybody can see that flashlight for miles. That's the way light works. It just keeps on going. The darkness never overcomes the light. So, penetrate the darkness, stick to the kingdom way, do things God's way, and let your light shine and your salt savor. Be salty. Okay, the next passage is called the fulfillment of the law in the NIV. Jesus lays out his relationship to the law of Moses and the prophets, so really all of Scripture. And he says that he is the fulfillment, he is the completion, sometimes it's translated the perfection of those Scriptures. The words that were given to Moses and to the prophets were from God, they were divinely inspired, they were binding, and in many cases, those words from Moses and the rest of the prophets pointed toward the Messiah who was going to come. Jesus is the realization of those long ago spoken words. He is the fulfillment of them, the realization of them. I think we also should see some importance to Scripture here. When Jesus says that he hasn't come to do away with it, but to fulfill it, we need to be careful not to run over God's words, or to teach others to ignore this piece or that piece, that something is more important than another. The Pharisees have done that. The teachers of the law have done that. They say that they love the law, they're devoted to the law, they're carrying out perfectly all that the law has commanded them to do, but they have also run roughshod over some pieces of it all the time. We saw that somewhere. Where? In the sermon, when Jesus is at the meal with the Pharisees, he talks to them about the fact that they have been very careful to go through the garden. 9 leaves for me, 1 leaf for God. 9 roots for me, 1 root for God. 9 seeds for me, 1 seed for God. And they're so diligent and so dedicated to the law that they're tithing on dill, cumin, horseradish, potatoes, eggs, whatever it is that they own. 1/10 of it goes to God. But at the same time, there are dozens of people, thousands of people around them who are hungry, who are in great need, and they have strained the gnat and swallowed the camel, or maybe it's backwards of that. Strain the camel, swallow the gnat. No, that's not right. Strain the gnat, strain the camel. Yeah, whatever I said the first time. Okay, they've been so very careful to make sure that it's right down to the very last I dot and T cross, that they've got it all done. They've been so laser focused on that they have missed the fact that all of their neighbors are in great need. And if they were really righteous, if they really had a heart after God, they would make sure that those people around them weren't in need.
Can't see the forest for the trees.
Can't see the forest for the trees. That's right. Real, interior, God-loving righteousness is much more important than external perfection. The very best external perfection is still not perfect. Right? You can do everything you know how to do. Check all the boxes. Follow all the rules. But if you just miss some, it's not perfect. And that's what Jesus is trying to point out. They work so very hard to make sure everything is taken care of, but they will never get it all taken care of. The very best external perfection is still not perfect. And I would go back to what Jesus says at the beginning. Who is it that gets the kingdom? Those who are poor in spirit, not those who are rich in pride, not those who are full of themselves. Okay? Any thoughts or questions there? Take a Kleenex break. Nope. You got nothing? All right. All right. So the next piece of the sermon, actually the next pieces of the sermon, Jesus is going to talk about murder, adultery, divorce, oaths, and retaliation. As he talks about each of these issues, which are pretty significant. I mean, murder and adultery are pretty big. Jesus tells the crowds on the mountainside that they have been taught one way. This is what the rule says, but he has a much bigger principle, a more foundational principle that needs to be applied. Verse 21. You have heard it said that it was said to the people long ago, "You shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Anyone who says to a brother or sister, 'Rakah,' is answerable to the court, and anyone who says, 'You fool,' will be in danger of the fire of hell. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to him or to them, and then come and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. Truly, I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny." Murder is bad. It is sinful. Jesus is not changing that. He's not saying, hey, in the law of Moses said that murdering somebody was bad. He didn't really mean that. This is really what it is. That's not the point that Jesus is making. He's not changing the sinfulness or the heinousness of murder. But the foundation for murder is much more common and should be a much greater concern. What does he say is the basis for murder? Anger. Anger bitterness, resentment, broken relationships. That's where murder springs from. If you're getting along with everybody's all sweetness and light, bluebirds and rainbows and cupcakes, you really don't think about killing very many people when the whole world is, standing in a circle singing Kumbaya, sharing a Coke. That's not where murder comes from. Murder comes when you're ticked, when you're angry, when somebody has done something to you. So what Jesus says is, murder is against the law, it is sinful behavior, but don't ever let it get that far. You have to deal with the base problem, your anger, your entitlement, your pride, whatever it is that causes that bitterness and resentment. That's where you need to focus. Don't allow anger and division to take a deep, murderous root. Forgiveness and reconciliation are vital to the followers of Jesus. You want to be a part of the kingdom? You have to live in the kingdom way. The kingdom way is forgiveness and reconciliation. Period. You're just going to let that go. And no comments, no questions.
Those are big words.
Yeah.
If you need me to help you spell them, I can do that. This sermon really is kind of about the way of God's kingdom. And so, in most of these different areas, that's what we're going to see is, what is the way of the kingdom? Well, when it comes to murder, the way of the kingdom is forgive and reconcile first. Don't let it go so far. Don't allow it. Don't permit it. Always work to make things right.
So, abortion is murder, but it doesn't come from anger. It's simple.
Joan is asking about abortion. If abortion is murder, but does abortion, it doesn't come from anger. It might come from resentment and bitterness. Not rage necessarily, but resentment about my life was going to go this way, and because of this now my life is going to go that way. I don't want to do that, and so I'm going to bring about the end of it. But there are other factors in that as well. Fear, anxiety, shame, guilt, selfishness, inconvenience, discomfort. I mean, there are many different reasons to make that decision. But I guess I have always seen that for many people, it's, I had this kind of a plan. This is the way things were going to go. This has now happened to me, and we're taking this kind of a turn, and that is not where I want to go. Nothing is going to get in my way of going over here. So I'm ending this right now.
Okay, thank you.
All right, rolling on. Verse 27. Adultery. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery, but I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. Some people in the last 2,000 years have taken these verses very literally. There have been many religious people who have read those words and they have cut off a hand, they have gouged out an eye, and my perspective would be that they found out that they still struggled with lust and desire, even though they had no eye left. They still had a brain. They still had a mind. I do not believe in any sense Jesus is asking us to do physical damage to our God-given bodies to deal with temptation and desire and lust. Because even though I process images with my eyes, that's not where they reside. It's on the hard drive. It's not on the camera lens. It's in the hard drive. My imagination is the real issue. Again, adultery is bad. It is sinful. Jesus isn't changing that. But the basis for adultery is much more common. Unchecked, unbridled, savored, treasured lust will quickly move you into adultery. The text tells us that a man who is charged by lust will do what is necessary to entice the woman to lust as well. It doesn't show up so much in the English, but that's what the original language says. Hey, I'm all stirred up with lust and desire for that little chickie poo over there, and so I'm going to buy her enough drinks, I'm going to sweet talk her enough, I'm going to buy her enough trinkets that she will consider giving in to lust with me. If you have undressed him or her in your mind, you have already taken the first steps in lust. Do not allow lust and desire to drag you or push you into sexual sin. Protect and purify your imagination, as it is the home for most sin. It's not your eyes. It's not your hand. It's your mind. It's your heart. It's your brain. This beautiful imagination that God has given to us can be corrupted. We put enough garbage into it, and that's all it's going to be full of. That's how we'll always process information. Okay, verses 31 and 32 kind of go right along with it. It has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, makes her the victim of adultery, and anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Okay? So this kind of follows right along. We've just looked at sexual immorality and adultery. The law of Moses allowed for divorce. You can read about that in Deuteronomy 24. But it was never God's desire.
Okay. Just ask,
Yes, sir, Rob.
Is there something lost in translation, or just let men off the hook?
Is there something lost in translation, or is it just letting men off the hook?
There's nothing. There's no mention of this is
Consequences.
bad for men as well. It says makes her commit adultery. Whoever marries her commits adultery.
Well, men are not getting all the way off the hook in this. Because Jesus is really, it's kind of like when you point over here, there's three fingers pointing back at you. I mean, they will point at that woman, you know, she's been divorced, and so she's been married to somebody else now, and she's an adulteress. Well, it's your own hard-heartedness that forced her to be divorced in the first place.
And it kind of leads me just to make a general comment about these, kind of leads me to, this kind of leads me to that. To me, this feels more like an explanation than instruction.
It feels more like an explanation
I feel
than
like-
instruction.
When I found my way back to Christ, it feels like these were written on my heart. Like if I'm driving down the road, somebody cuts me off. I don't get mad very often, but when I do, I instantly feel bad for it.
Well, the Holy Spirit is doing his job then.
It's just, yeah, it's like all this was just instantly put in here. Does that make sense?
I believe that when we get serious about our faith, when we really want to live in this new kingdom way, that God's Holy Spirit reminds us of the things that we've heard. He reminds us of the things that we've read, that we've studied, and that he brings those up. I would go with it mostly inopportune moments from our perspective, but it just in the moment that they're needed to remind us of our anger, of our rage, of our bitterness, resentment, desire, lust. I mean, when Jesus is talking here, he's speaking into a very different culture than the one that we have. Jesus's Jewish culture had allowed for centuries that if a man didn't really approve of the wife that he had married, that he could send her away. It didn't matter if it was because she had been sleeping around, that she had an affair with a neighbor. It could just be that he's tired of her burning the bread, or she wasn't, scratching his back every time he asked, or whatever it was. He can just say, I divorce you, and send her away. Now, in Jesus' culture, in Hebrew culture, there wasn't a place for single adult women. They didn't own property. There were no jobs. And so the only recourse left for a single adult woman was to attach herself to another man. We could get kind of deep in the weeds on everything that Moses says about, well, if the second husband decides he doesn't want to marry her either, she can't go back and marry the first husband because that's even more adulterous. Like, that's all just kind of messed up to me a little bit anyway. But again, Jesus is not this is not a guidebook that says if your spouse has been sexually unfaithful, you should divorce them. That's not what this is about. Except for marital unfaithfulness, that's really not the deal. Okay? Sexual intimacy is supposed to be reserved for the bonds of marriage. And I think one of the things that Jesus teaches us here is that dissolving the marriage doesn't dissolve the consequences of sin. You just think that by making the marriage go away, that the consequences of the sin are going to go away. Well, that's not true. We shouldn't be looking at this as this is my loophole. Again, it kind of goes back to the heart issue. So you're a spouse who has been cheated on. Can you get a divorce? The law of Moses says you can. But what would be better? What would be more in line with the kingdom?
Isn't he also
Forgiveness.
pointing out that if they do that, then that forces the woman to break a commandment, to break another commandment. And also a woman can't commit adultery by herself. So without saying it in so many words, he's still putting it on the males.
Okay, so Jesus is kind of, he's not just putting all of this onto one person in the relationship. Because if a woman is sent away by her husband, the husband really is forcing her into, it could be actually more than one thing, not just adultery, but maybe into prostitution. Because there were not very many options available to a woman during Jesus' time. And it is really hard, as Susan has pointed out. You really have a hard time committing adultery by yourself.
I have something else that in my mind too, though. You know, you could get rid of your wife for almost any reason back then. Just, I don't like you. And this is saying, oh no, it has to be much, much, much more serious.
If Moses' law allowed for you to get rid of your spouse for any reason, your wife, sorry, I shouldn't try to be equal here. A husband can get rid of a wife for really almost any reason, but Jesus is saying here that it really ought to be a much more serious matter than that. Not just because she looks a little too frumpy now, then she's not quite as sexy as she used to be when she was 24. Yeah, it should be
Exception, a reason of, immorality, unchastity, not just stop burning the bread.
Yeah.
If you're gonna do it, it really better be over something, because you're both gonna suffer for it.
And even then, I believe that Jesus would say that the kingdom way
Yes,
would be forgive
exactly.
and reconcile. Which nobody in our culture wants to
That would
hear.
be really hard in our culture, but.
It does happen.
Because we've
It is
abdicated
close.
That does
responsibility.
happen, but.
It does happen. All right, let's roll on. We can get bogged down in that one for a long, long time. Verse 33. And here it's like we go from these really big murder, adultery, and divorce to oaths. Again, you have heard that it was said to the people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. But I tell you, don't swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it's God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it's the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. Maybe the reason that we have an issue with this in this list is because we don't really feel like we have an issue with this in our life. That we're not swearing oaths or vows to God in a lot of regards. The law of Moses forbade irreverent oaths, light use of the Lord's name, and broken vows. You throw out some kind of a statement by all that is good and right, I swear I will. Moses' law says, no, that's wrong, don't do that. You misuse the Lord's name, you break a vow, a promise that you made in the presence of many witnesses before God. All those things are forbidden. The view was that once the Lord's name was invoked, the vow to which it was attached became a debt that had to be paid to the Lord. I swear by all that is holy, I swear by the name of the Almighty, that I will bring chocolate cake to the lunch this afternoon. Well, you know what? By God, you had better bring that chocolate cake. Because you have brought the holy creator of the universe into this into this arrangement. It wasn't necessary for him to be there, but you felt compelled to bring him into that statement, and so now you must do it. That's what the law of Moses said. It is not something to be taken lightly. We don't throw the Lord's name around in a thoughtless, empty, vain, silly, irreverent way. So Jesus gives some guidelines. Basically, don't do it. Don't make vows. Don't swear by anything ever. Because if you do, you gotta do it. It's much better if you don't swear and you just fulfill what you've said you are gonna do. Jesus tells the crowd that they shouldn't make those kind of vows. If you don't swear, it's impossible to swear falsely. If you don't swear by heaven and earth, or by the white throne of judgment, or by the Holy Spirit of God, if you're not making those kinds of statements, then you can't swear falsely, which is to swear and then not do it. Jesus makes it pretty clear. Just say yes or no. Hey, are you bringing the chocolate cake? I'm going to try it. I plan to. Yes, I will. No, I won't. Just give a simple answer. It is unnecessary and unwise to live your life swearing by the most holy and righteous things in the universe and then failing to carry them out. It's better to just not say anything at all.
What about in the court of law?
Yeah, that's one of the things that some of the scholars and commentators brought up. There are people who refuse to take that. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth of God? I'm not going to take that oath.
Well, even the president doesn't take an oath.
Politicians, yeah,
Yeah.
oath of office.
There are some churches that their people, if they go to testify, they refuse to, based on that teaching of Jesus. Is that right or wrong? I don't know.
You get charged with contempt, go to jail for a week.
I do know that I stopped seeing that all the time in TV shows and movies.
I feel like the judge would be scared to charge you with contempt based on some fire that might come down from religious groups helping you out based on discrimination.
Right.
Maybe.
Yeah, you're right.
Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Don't swear by anything else. Not by creatures on the earth, not by the hairs on my head, not on my mother-in-law's grave, not on the throne of God, not on anything. Just, will you tell the truth? I promise I will tell the truth.
I've heard that some husbands will swear in court on the Quran. Does the Quran hold them to the same standard as the Bible holds up? And have, I guess it works in court, but.
And if you're an atheist, have you sworn to tell the truth or not? You said the words.
And then you don't have to tell the truth.
Did they mean anything at that point?
Verse 38. Rose's question is going to have to go unanswered. I don't know what they do. Should we take that kind of an oath? Well, we should be telling the truth and letting our yes be yes and no be no all the time. And certainly if we place our hand on the Bible and swear that we will, we absolutely ought to.
So you should anyway.
Verse 38. You have heard that it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. If anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. Okay, so Jesus is talking here about personal injury and revenge. The rule was, in the Old Testament, that if you and I are fighting and I knock out your front tooth, you get to knock out my front tooth. If something happens and I poke out your eye, you get to poke out my eye. The Greek or the Latin word for it is lex talionis, the law of retaliation, the eye for eye rule. Judgments could be made. You know, he knocked out my tooth. Well, that is worth 3 sheep, or that's worth whatever. Payment in cash or in kind was often the result of some kind of an offense or injury. And so the law of retaliation was put into place to make sure that things didn't get out of hand. Well, he knocked out my front tooth, and so judge, what's that worth? That is worth $1 million. No, it's not. That's worth maybe $500 if you go and get an implant done. Maybe $2,000, depending on how nice it's going to be. You can get some dental work done for this amount of money. That's as far as the settlement's going to go. That's what the law of retaliation is in place for. That the punishment and the payment fit the crime. There's no teaching people a lesson by making it a $500 million settlement over this tiny little offense. But Jesus is the fulfiller of this law. He points toward the hardness of hearts and the insistence on revenge. Again, the kingdom way is about the heart. You hurt me. I'm not going to insist that I get to hurt you back. In Ezekiel 36, verse 26, the Lord speaks there about the change in heart that he can make. Ezekiel 36:26 says, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. Jesus is interested in having hearts that are changed, not in the exact equivalence of the law. You burn down my house, I get to burn down yours. That's what the law says. Sorry, stinks to be you. I know it's an accident, but I demand restitution. I demand my pound of flesh, and so I'm going to burn down your house as well. I did hear yesterday on the radio, when I was getting ready, the DJs were talking about people who were having bad days. I can't remember if it was Air One or K-Love, but they shared a story about a realtor who had had their very worst day. She was showing a house. There were renters who were living in the house, and there was a lamp on. There were some clothes that she wanted to move out of the way, so she kind of threw things out of the way. The clothing caught on fire and burned the house down to the studs. Like, I don't know how you recover from that. And you know that the deal is, it's probably not one of those people who is, selling 60 homes a year. This is probably somebody's soccer mom who just finished up her real estate license. And so it's a horrible story. It's a horrible story. Her insurance, or her company, ended up having to pay for the house and all of the renters, their things that were destroyed in the fire as well. So that's kind of like a double gut punch there. But again, it's about hearts. Jesus says, make sure your heart is soft. If somebody asks you for something, they demand your shirt, give them your jacket. If they need you to go with them a mile, go with them too. When we can take that too far and say, well, doesn't this principle kind of turn us into a doormat? This soft, gooey milksop who just does what everybody asks me to do because I can't say no because Jesus says I got to do everything. I don't know. There's probably a line in there where you're no longer, where you don't allow yourself to be a victim. But again, this is a heart condition. Don't let your hard heart get in the way. All right. I'm going to make a mark right there. We're going to start next time with Matthew 5, verse 43, which is great because we have to go back to Luke chapter 6 to talk about the same thing, the love for enemies. All right? Can I see your pen, Cody? Any crayon will do.
I'm gonna say this one's a.
Marilyn brought an individual cheesecake for dessert.
Oh, yeah.
We're gonna have a lot of, plus
Last time
ice
we
cream
had no
bar.
desserts, this time we will have all
I
desserts.
have a feeling that James wants chocolate cake.
I don't know
No,
if
it-
we're allowed to have chocolate cake.
Well, based on everything that's going on in my life, I'd say that
Why
could
not?
maybe be absolutely the worst thing I could choose to do.
Probably.
So, I'm going to turn off the camera here. Let me say to you all there in YouTube land, thanks for following along. You can go back and watch episodes that you've missed. You can put me on repeat and waft off into blissful sleep every night at the sound of my voice if you like. But I would ask you, if you've made it this far, make a comment, ask a question, let me know what you're thinking about. I'd love to hear from you. And if you subscribe to this channel, every time we post something, that'll show up. Thanks.
I do